We're in Italy.
Have we started here yet?
Hey everyone, how are you? We're gonna start in a moment or two. Nice to have you guys join. Thank you. Hope you've all had a wonderful week. I think we'll start in a moment. Okay. Give me one moment. Okay, so I'm going to begin and hopefully others will join and enjoy some Pirkei Avot insight. So this week, we are going to be discussing chapter 6. This is the last and final chapter of the Pirkei Avot. It's actually very interesting that the Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who composed who wrote and put down into words from the Mishnah, the Pirkei Avot, actually got this last chapter from the Baraita, not from the Mishnah. Right? He went through the Mishnah and compiled this book, Pirkei Avot, full of ethics and morals and ways that a Jew should conduct their life. You may hear my children in the background. Unfortunately, they weren't feeling so well last night, so we've kept them home from camp today. You know what? Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay, hopefully we won't have any interruptions. So, sorry, as I was saying, so the Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi compiled this book, Pirkei Avot. He took many different excerpts and ideas from the Mishnah and compiled it into a book of ethics that really represents the value system of the Torah and of Judaism. But this last chapter he got from the Baraita, and so it's a little different. And the focus on this chapter is all about the Torah, how to acquire Torah, the significance of Torah, the specialness of Torah. So I'm going to read inside. There are 11 Baraitas. Some are shorter, some are longer, and it's really, I was reading it as I was preparing for this class, and it's so interesting to really delve deep into understanding the perspective of the sages when it comes to the Torah. So I'm going to be reading the translation of the first Baraita. So it says, the Chachamim taught the following perek of the Baraita, and in the language of the Mishnah. And it says, blessed is Hashem who chose the sages and their teaching. Rabbi Meir would say, whoever involves himself in Torah learning for its own sake, because it is a mitzvah to learn Hashem's Torah, will merit many good things. In fact, the creation of the entire world is worthwhile just for him. Some of the many things he merits: he is called a friend, a beloved of Hashem. He loves Hashem, he loves Hashem's creations, he makes God happy, he makes people happy. The Torah then clothes him and surrounds him with humility and awe. It prepares him to be righteous, dedicated to Hashem, upright and trusted. It also distances him from sin and brings him close to merit. People enjoy his good advice, his wisdom, his understanding, and his strength. As it says in Mishlei, good advice and wisdom are mine, says the Torah. I am understanding, strength is mine, and the Torah gives these good qualities to those who learn it. It also gives him royalty, authority, and the ability to judge properly. The secrets of the Torah are revealed to him. He becomes like a fountain that flows with ever-increasing strength, and like a river that never stops flowing. He becomes modest, patient, forgiving when he's insulted, and the Torah makes him great, and it raises him above all the things. So that was the first Baraita. And there are so many things to unpack that we just said. The first thing is that one who involves himself for the Torah for its own sake will merit good things, right? Torah values good intentions and holy intentions. When we are learning Torah and when we're involving ourselves in Judaism for the right reasons, to connect to God, to further our understanding of Judaism, to learn about what the Torah teaches, that's the right reason. The Torah for itself, right? One shouldn't learn the Torah to become more respected, to become better than others or holier, or a rabbi even. That's not a good reason to learn Torah. It needs to be learning for its own sake. And what's interesting about the Torah, as opposed to any other subject learned, is, and we see that in this Baraita, is the Torah changes a person. When a person's involved and really involved in learning Torah, he starts to become a better person, because that's what the Torah is really all about. It's about serving Hashem, becoming a better person, doing the mitzvot, whereas a different subject doesn't necessarily change a person. Yes, they may have more knowledge, they may have more understanding in that area, but the Torah does more than just give us knowledge and understanding. It really brings holiness within us, because it's God's Torah. God is holy, and so when we involve ourselves in the Torah, we become holy, and that affects our personalities, affects who we are. And so this is a praise of the Torah, a great thing about the Torah, that he becomes a better, broader person. It also says in this Mishnah why also a person who involves himself in Torah becomes a great person is because when a person is so busy learning Torah and involved in the classes and really bringing the ideas learned into their consciousness, they won't have time for sin. The Torah tells us that when does sin happen? When does a person come to, transgress a commandment or come to get involved in non-ideal things and not ideal situations? Is when he is, in a sense, bored. When, in a sense, he has a bit of free time. That's when the Yetzer Hara, that's when the, little voice comes up and says, let's just do this. Or, it's not a big deal to do that. But when a person is constantly involved in learning and in applying that learning, he won't have time for this spirit of folliness, that's what it says, to come to him, and it prevents him from sin. And of course, somebody who's constantly involved in Torah and not have time for sin, this of course changes him to be a better, kinder, and more productive person. Also, it also says that a person who involves himself with Torah will have friends. And it's interesting to say that. What does that really mean? And it says that when a person is motivated by their own selfish desires, every single person's selfish desire, unfortunately, we're human, we all have some of them. But if you look at each person's selfish desire or selfish motive here and there, it's very different, one person to the next. One person, it may be, the examples are leaving me, but we can understand that no two person sin the same, right? No two people have the same selfish or the same animalistic tendencies or ways that they, misbehave, say. So when a person acts out of their selfish motives, they're very often not necessarily acting or participating with quite a few other people, since that's subjective. But when it comes to doing good and involved ourselves in good, right, volunteering, involved in doing good, that is something that everybody shares. Everybody shares the same motive, the same need to do good, to be helpful, to contribute. And so when you choose to contribute and to do good, you will find others with you. You'll find others, say, volunteering with you. And that brings a sense of community when you're involved in doing good with others. And so that's a byproduct of involving ourselves with Torah as well. Okay, and we're going to now turn over to the second Baraita, the second one. And this, does anyone have any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask to contribute. Yes, Fern.
No, can you just, I usually look at my phone while I'm on my iPad to see what page is it? Is it this a certain parak or is it
Yes,
the end?
it's chapter 6.
Chapter
chapter
6.
6.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. I came in late.
No, that's perfect. And we're going to now look into the second Baraita. And as we said, the other chapters have a Mishnah. This one has a Baraita, which, and this one begins with Rabbi Yehoshua. He is going to be telling us some insight. Again, all these are related to the Torah, and we're going to see that. And before actually we get to the second Baraita, the first one mentioned that Torah becomes a shelter to him. So we're going to see later, it mentions it also again, this idea. But it says that when we learn something, when we learn Torah, Torah can become one of 3 levels. So when we learn Torah and we listen to a Torah class and we don't really understand what's going on, but we want to be involved, and so we listen anyway. So we don't have that much understanding with everything. That's still beautiful. That's still great. And so Torah becomes a shelter for him. When it's considered, Torah becomes a shelter for him. It protects him. When a person listens to a Torah class and understands what's going on and listens and hears, then it says that Torah becomes like clothing to him. It protects him a little more than just shelter. And then it says, when a person takes the Torah that he has really learned and he internalizes it, he makes it a part of himself and he lets it affect him and affect his actions, the Torah then becomes food, considered like food for him. And we know food is ingested and food really helps us to grow and be better. Okay, so just a quick insight into 3 ways that we can have the Torah affect us, whether it be it as a shelter for us, whether like clothing, or whether like food. And we'll see again later the value of listening and involving ourselves in Torah, even if we may not understand it completely. So I'm gonna read number 2 in English. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, every single day, a heavenly voice that is heard by the neshama, it comes out from Har Chorev. It announces and says, woe is to people who insult the Torah by not learning with feeling. They are to be pitied because anyone who does not fervently devote himself to Torah is called shameful. As it says in the Mishlei, a beautiful woman without flavor is like a golden ring on a pig's nose. Torah learning must be filled with passion and devotion. There is another advantage of being occupied with Torah. As it says in the Torah, the luchos are Hashem's work. The writing is Hashem's writing engraved on the luchot. Do not read the word as charut, engraved, but as cherut, freedom, because there is no person who is free from social pressures and temptations and able to reach his full potential, except one who involves himself in the Torah learning. Whoever involves himself in Torah learning is uplifted. As it says in the Torah, Bnei Yisrael traveled from Matana to Nachaliel, from Nachaliel to Bamos. The Chamim explain, the sages explain the significance of these names. When a person uses a Matana, the gift of Torah, Hashem then becomes his Nachaliel, his inheritance, which brings him to an elevated place. So the beginning of this Baraita, it discusses this heavenly voice that comes out from Har Horeb, which the sages say is the location of Mount Sinai in the desert. And apparently the soul hears it all the way from the desert near Egypt. The soul hears this calling. Now, this is not something we can ever tap into consciously, but the sages say that, say a day or two, you suddenly feel out of nowhere inspired to do better, inspired to be better. You should know that it could very, very much be because your soul was awakened from this calling. Of course, we're not really sure how that works, since I don't think anybody has really heard it on a physical level. But again, we know that there are multiple dimensions on a spiritual plane, and it has an effect on our souls as well. So what's interesting that this Baraita brings is this highly, highly debated concept when it comes to freedom, right? After the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, they could not do what they wanted to do. They were enslaved every morning, every night. They slaved away in Egypt. And finally, God took them out of Egypt. God saved them. And what does he do immediately after he releases them? He gives them the Torah. He gives them 613 commandments. So all the commentaries immediately start to argue and discuss and say, wait, did God just take the Jews from a slavery now to another slavery? Right? Giving them 613 mitzvot, giving them commandments that they need to do, telling them how they need to eat and how they need to celebrate, Saturday, what they need to do then. Wait, we just switched out one set of rules for another set of rules. How is that freedom? And so many commentaries come to try to explain how it could be that the Torah is not a new slavery with new restrictions similar to Egypt, but real freedom is expressed in the Torah. So this Baraita discusses and that the first reason why the Torah is free is because we all suffer, it says here, social pressure. We often feel a sense of social pressure and, right, keeping up with the Joneses. And this person just renovated their house. Now I feel compelled, like, wait, mine is outdated. Maybe I need to upgrade, right? There's that social pressure, unfortunately, that does exist in this physical world. But the Torah tells us that, hey, when you focus on the Torah, when you acquire the value system of the Torah, you will be free from this pressure, because the Torah says that this is the correct way to behave. This is where you should invest your time and energy. The Torah has a set of values that are not aligned with maybe our neighbors or with the Joneses. And so when you can stay true to your values, you won't feel pressured to acquire the values of your neighbors and the value of having the most updated cell phone or the most updated car. That pressure can be relieved when we realize and involve ourselves in the Torah value. And the Torah values, whatever physical things will help us serve God, that's what's needed. Not necessarily investing in and completely involving ourselves constantly in physical matters, right? Having a higher sense of purpose, focusing more and investing on our spirituality, on our Judaism. So that's one way that our Torah offers us a sense of freedom. But the commentaries really bring a deeper explanation. And they say that what is true freedom? True freedom is the ability to express yourself. Because when a person say is free to do nothing, right? They have no rules, no boundaries. They're not actually free. They're actually a slave to their animalistic self. They're slave to their desires. One day they're in the mood of this. Okay, I'll go along with that. The next day I'm in the mood of that. I'll go along with that. That is actually a type of slavery just to your mood and your desires. That's not real freedom at all. Real freedom is the ability to express who you are and what you have to offer, right? Say, for example, a musician. Now, my uncle is a musician, and I'm not a musician at all, so it's very hard for me to understand. But when my uncle doesn't play music for like a week or two, he starts to physically need it. He physically feels challenged because he can't play music. There's something about expressing music that is really healing, really necessary for him. And I'm sure with other mediums of art, right? A person who has that talent and that's the way they express themselves, they feel a sense of not completeness when they're not able to use and express their talent. So again, I'm not a musician, so I can't imagine what that's like. But if you take away a musician's instrument and you tell him you're not allowed to play music for the rest of, the month or your life, you've just taken away his freedom, right? Because expressing his music is who he is, part of who he is. And so too, the Torah tells us, our soul, we all have a soul within us. And our soul expresses freedom by connecting with God. When we connect with God, we are expressing true freedom because that is aligned with who we really are. We are really godly beings, godly souls who appreciate and value meaningful interactions and holy experiences. And so true freedom is when we can express our true selves, and that is our soul. And our soul chooses and wishes to serve God and connect to God. And yes, that sometimes is challenging for our physical selves, but we have to remember that our physical self is not really who we are. And when we, get rid of all boundaries and all rules, we're not freer. We're not expressing true freedom. And something also interesting is that the idea of true happiness is connected with our soul. And so often people are on a search for happiness for their whole life, and they don't realize it's really right inside them. When you delve into your soul and you find meaning and purpose from a soul level, right? So many people will suddenly wake up one day and realize, oh my goodness, I need to, spend my money in the correct places, right? Instead of buying the next boat and the next sports car, they want to invest their money in a meaningful way. And that's coming from the soul. And that's really brings true meaning and happiness, because after all, happiness resides in the soul within us. So yes, so that discussion on freedom is touched upon here. We're going to take a moment now to turn to the third baraita, number 3. I'm hoping we can just touch a little bit on all of them today. We'll see how much time we have. Okay, number 3 says, one who learns a single perek, right, a single chapter, a single halacha, a single sentence, a single statement, or even a single letter of the Torah from his friend, he must treat him with honor. As we learn from King David, Israel's king, he learned only 2 things from Achitophel, to learn together with others rather than alone, and to walk with others enthusiastically when going to learn. And he called him his rabbi, his leader, and his teacher. As King David says to Achitophel in Tehillim, "You are a man on my level, you are my leader and my teacher." This leads to obvious conclusion. If King David, the king of Israel, learned only 2 things from Achitophel and still called him his rabbi, his leader, and his teacher, then an ordinary person who learns a single line, a single halakha, a single statement, or even a single letter of Torah from his friend should surely treat him with honor. Honor is earned only for Torah, as it says, the sages will inherit honor, the perfect ones will inherit good, and only Torah is truly good. As it says in Mishlei, I, God, have given you a good teaching, do not forsake my Torah. So interesting, the focus and the emphasis on giving honor and respect to absolutely anyone you learn anything from. You know, as we gave King David's example, Achitophel was not such a kind, holy person, yet King David still learned something from him, and therefore he called him in the Tehillim, book of Tehillim, he called him my rabbi, my leader, my teacher. And it emphasizes that it's so important to value and respect and honor a person who contributed Torah to you in any way, even a single letter. And the reason for this, part of the reason for this, right, it's quite amazing, is that when a person teaches you something of Torah, whether large, whether small, they are offering you something much deeper than just the superficial idea or the simple letter or sentence. They're really offering you a moment of connecting to God, because that is what happens when we learn Torah. We're connecting to God. And it's so interesting that, you know, to me, I've had so many teachers in the past, you know, and thinking back now, wow, it's true. They all, in a small way or in a big way, contributed to my Torah learning. And of course, it requires us to teach them, to treat them with respect. Okay. And now we're going to read the 4th Baraita, which says, "This is the way to master Torah. Eat bread with salt, drink small amounts of water, sleep on the ground, live a life of hardship without indulging in physical pleasures, and work hard in Torah." It says in Tehillim that if you do so, you will be fortunate and it will be good for you. You will be fortunate in this world and it will be good for you in the world to come. So this is a very interesting topic. It's saying that in order for you to master Torah, you need to basically eat terribly, barely drink, sleep on the ground, and live a life of hardship. So this is something very interesting. Our rabbis tell us that our bodies nowadays are not the same as their bodies then. And so while in the past, it was the way of the sages is they would not buy themselves beautiful things in the home. They wouldn't buy themselves a comfortable bed. They would limit their physical pleasures in order so that their spiritual pleasure in the world to come would be greater, based on this teaching. And it's quite interesting to hear about all these ways that the people would fast every Monday and Thursday. They would, I believe, and they would really not take care of themselves the way we know now we need to. And interestingly enough, this is something that is not accepted nowadays. It's not done nowadays because our bodies are not the same. So it is very important to take care of our health, to make sure we're sleeping properly. And to take care of ourselves and to, you know, not treat our bodies this way, not intentionally live a life of hardship, because that's not the way that we, not even just physically, are going to be able to serve God in the best way, but also mentally. that won't be conducive to us for having a good relationship with Hashem and a good relationship with ourselves, which of course is required to serve God. So it is very interesting. I think there's so much more that I haven't delved into on this topic, but I do feel it doesn't really apply to us so much. One thing though that it does say is it says that in this world, we don't only experience true goodness. Unfortunately, there is goodness that's hidden in this world. We see bad behavior, we see negativity. And so in the world to come is really the only place where we will experience the full extent of what it means, only good things. And in this world, we can experience happiness. And what's interesting about the difference between happiness and good things is happiness, unfortunately, is often fleeting. We'll experience happiness for a couple moments, but then the next challenge comes along or the next disappointment comes along, and then we feel our happiness has kind of diminished. Happiness, unfortunately, in this world is not something that is lasting. And so many people frustrate themselves to, when I will achieve this, then I'll be happy. And when I can have that, then I'll be happy. But we have to realize that happiness is an experience. It's a feeling like any other feeling that, sometimes we feel sad and then sometimes we, aren't sad anymore. And that's the same with happiness. And we hope and we pray and we wish others that we have many moments of happiness. But happiness is not a destination, and it's not possible for a person to always be happy in this world. It says happiness is fleeting in this world. And to me, that was so insightful because there's so many books out there, how to find happiness and how to be happy. And we have to just embrace that happiness is not a destination. Happiness happens along our journey, and to appreciate when we do and try to, help ourselves to experience more of it, but not become obsessed with it. And in the next world, yes, Fern. Oh, you're on mute. Let me see if I can.
I'm reading chapter 4, as you're speaking, and there's no time mentioned in this paragraph. So, it's almost describing kind of a deep meditation, reflection. You don't sit down and study Torah with a big sandwich in front of you and a pickle and study. You have to isolate yourself from, doesn't mean that you do it all day. It doesn't mean that, any of that stuff. You don't, maybe if you nap and you're in the middle of Torah, you're tired, you lie down on the floor, you think, you meditate. In other words, you shouldn't be taken away or distracted from the thought that you're on and studying Torah. It's almost could be a set time, as you said, Monday, Thursday, Shabbat we celebrate, so it's a different calling, and yet you're still studying Torah. But I think that the lack of mentioning how much time, it's a timeless thing, whether it's an hour or 3 hours, separate yourself from your mundane pleasures. That's how we can take it forward to today, to really concentrate, not answer your cell phone, that kind of thing.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Fern, for contributing that. That's so beautiful. Absolutely, we so can achieve that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So it does say though that in the next world there will be only good, and when there is only good, and the only good will be everlasting, and that's something which unfortunately we don't experience here. There was a, okay. I'm going to touch on the Baraita number 5 now. Yes. Oh, one other thing though, that the commentaries tell us that a person is not judged by how much they accomplish, but their Torah learning is determined in terms of effort. So if a person, you know, set aside their schedule and they had so much going on and they needed effort to make the Torah class, to make time for the Torah class, that it has more value than maybe somebody who is just sitting in the bed midrash in the synagogue all day learning Torah. Again, we don't know, but there's an extreme amount of value given when we exert any amount of effort to involve ourselves in Torah. So it doesn't matter if how many times or whatever you do, our motivations have an impact. So number 5, the Baraita 5. Do not seek greatness for yourself and do not desire honor. The good deeds you do should be greater than your Torah learning. Do not desire the table of kings and their riches, because your table, the spiritual greatness you achieve, is greater than the fancy tables and the physical riches, and your crown of glory through your connection to Hashem is greater than their physical crown. Hashem, your boss, can be trusted to pay you the reward for your work for serving Hashem. So this Baraita tells us that don't be jealous of a rich neighbor. Don't be jealous if somebody has so much wealth, because your Torah learning is more valuable, right? If you involve yourself in Torah, that becomes more valuable than any physical wealth. And of course, we all know that after 120 years, when a person moves on to the next world, they don't take anything physical with them. They only take their good deeds and their Torah learning. That remains eternal forever, and they take that with them. And I love that reminder, you know, of sometimes we all need a reminder of what's most important in this world, because the world is full of distractions and full of ways that tell us that physicality is the most important and the thing to chase for. And the and the commentaries on this Baraita continue to say that this is where the Yetzer Hara, the evil influence, has the easiest time transforming us to be selfish, to not involve ourselves in Torah and learning. It comes to say, you want to be accepted by others. You need to have what they have. If you remove yourself from certain physical things, then you're going to be looked at differently. And it encourages us to value physical things so that it can help us socially. It can help us in other ways as well. And again, just a reminder that spirituality, sorry, I'm a little under the weather, I suppose. The Torah learning that we accomplish, the mitzvot, the good deeds, are eternal. And it also says here, that it's important that our good deeds come as a result of our learning. Judaism believes that Torah is not just an intellectual pursuit. Judaism holds so strongly that action of kindness is so important, in a way more important than learning Torah. Our Torah needs to affect our behavior as well. We're going to read number 6. I'd love to get through, a few more. There's even just reading the translation is so insightful. Torah is greater than being a king or a Kohen, because being a king comes with 30 special privileges and responsibilities. Being a Kohen comes with 24 gifts that must be given to the Kohen. For example, Bikurim, Chala, Truma. Whereas acquiring and mastering the Torah requires 48 qualities, and they are constant learning, careful listening, verbalizing what one learns, having an understanding heart, awe, fear, humility, happiness, purity, serving the sages, having close friends, discussing Torah with students, calmly and carefully analyzing, knowing Tanakh, knowing the Mishnah, limiting business activities, limiting worldly activities, limiting worldly pleasures, limiting one's sleep, limiting conversation, limiting laughter, being slow to anger, having a good heart, having faith in sages, accepting suffering, being one who knows his place, who is happy with what he has, who makes a protective fence around his words, who does not take credit for his achievements, who is beloved by others, who loves Hashem, who loves righteousness, who loves justice, who loves criticism, who keeps far from honor, who is not arrogant in his learning, who does not enjoy when he must give a halachic ruling, who carries the burden with his friend, who judges his friend favorably, who places his friend on the path of truth, who places him on the path of peace, who thinks carefully, deeply into his studies, who asks questions and answers others' questions, who learns in order to teach, who learns in order to know what to do, who makes his teacher wiser, who understands properly what he hears, and who quotes something in another person's name. In fact, you have learned that whoever quotes something in the name of the person who said it brings redemption to the world. As Esther told the king in Mordechai's name that Bigtan and Teresh wanted to kill the king, which ultimately led to the miracle of the Purim story and the redemption of the Jews. So before we delve into this Baraita, number 6 of chapter 6, there are so many commentaries and explanations to really understand, wait, what does this all mean? But one thing that it does, like, what does it mean that all these traits come along, all these values come along with acquiring Torah? A lot of them, are difficult to understand. But one thing that it does say is that being acquiring Torah is greater than being a Kohen and being a king. And it's interesting that these 48 qualities that this Baraita mentions, is the same numerical value as Moach, the brain. Moach also adds up to 48, and Moach is the brain. And through our brain is how our brain absorbing Torah and understanding and learning, that's how we acquire all these things. So that was an interesting number. And it does compare in the beginning here, Torah like water, saying that, I'm sure you've heard this example before, that just as the Torah is needed for our health and for our spiritual health and our spiritual sustenance, water, of course, we know is something that our physical bodies need to survive, and our spiritual souls need that to survive as well. And it's so interesting. Again, I'm not going to get into these 48. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to prepare and really delve into what they mean. But we do know at the very end, it mentions Queen Esther and Mordechai. And we know that she insisted on, when she told the king about Mordechai, what he overheard, right? Bigtan and Teresh plotted to kill him. She could have easily left Mordechai's name out, right? And taken some credit for herself. But she simply quoted him, and this led to the ultimate redemption, because at the end we saw that Mordechai was rewarded, and that led to Haman's downfall. it actually goes on to further, not just physically giving credit to the person when credit is due. Of course, that's a valuable trait and a valuable quality, in addition to what it said, how it can bring redemption. The sages say that we need to often remember to give credit where credit's due when it comes to learning Torah. When we teach Torah, right? I didn't come up with any of this information. It's all God's information. It's all the source of everything, of all the whole Torah is God, Hashem. And so a person, while they're learning and while they're teaching, should keep in mind to mention that and to realize that this is all the holy words and wisdom of Hashem, and really acknowledging the credit to Hashem and appreciating God and what he has given us to enhance our lives. And there's a story of Reb Hillel, who lived amongst the time of the Mishnah, and he really valued Torah so much that he couldn't afford to go to the synagogue. The Bet Medrash, the learning facility at those times, would charge money to come in, right? They had to keep their electricity, or not electricity, but they had to keep the building running in some way. And so they would charge people to come in to learn Torah. And Hillel could not afford to pay the money. And so he climbed up to the top of the roof where there was a skylight, allowing light to shine in. And he lay against the skylight so that he could press his ear right against the window. It was easier to listen than against the wall. And he learned words of Torah through pressing himself against the skylight the night. And in the morning, the students realized that, hey, it's dark out. Why is the skylight not showing us the sun? And they saw that Hillel had remained up there. He was actually even covered in snow because it had started to snow in the evening. And he kind of was stuck there because of his dedication to learn Torah. He really needed it. And so he, did that, climbed to the roof and stayed there all night. So it's quite amazing or kind of interesting to see the extent that someone would go to involve themselves in Torah, right? If we would go to a class and we see, oh, okay, it's closed, the synagogue's closed, or the class is finished or something, we're okay, whatever. But to see his dedication is quite astounding. Okay, number 7, the Baraita 7, we're going to read here. Torah is, and we may have to stop here because I see we're getting closer to time. Torah is great because it gives life both in this world and in the world to come, to those who learn it and do what it says, as it says in the Mishlei, because they, the words of Torah, are life itself to the person who finds them, and they are a cure for his whole body. It also says there that the Torah will be a cure for the body and marrow of your bones, making them stronger. It also says there that the Torah is a tree of life for those who hold on to it, and for those who support the Torah learning are fortunate. It also says that the words of Torah in your mind are like an elegant decoration for your head, and words of Torah spoken from the throat are a beautiful necklace for your neck. It also says there that Torah will give your head an elegant decoration and will give you a crown of beauty. It also says there indeed that by learning the Torah, your days will be increased and the years of life will be added to you. It also says that long life is at the Torah's right. If we learn Torah for the correct reason, because it's a mitzvah, it will give us long life in addition to wealth and honor. Since wealth and honor are at its left, even if we learn Torah for other reasons and not only because of a mitzvah, it will still give us wealth and honor. It also says the words of Torah will add to the length of your days and the years of your life and peace in your life. So a lot of it is difficult to understand, but we can really get that message and idea that Torah learning brings life, brings healing, brings joy, and brings long life as well. And what's interesting that it says, it specifically uses the word le'oseha, for those who do it, right? And we would want to say, wait, Torah, it should be to those who learn it, right? Or those to understand it. But no, as we said earlier, it's important that Torah leads to action, leads us to becoming better people, leads us to becoming more, observant, and really just becoming better people. So again, we see so much credit in the Torah. And one thing that it also says, and it says it a bit later on, is that Torah brings us all these good qualities, but good qualities that the Torah gives us, right, like riches and honor and wisdom, are sometimes a double-edged sword, right? We can use our honor for bad things or for good things. We can use our riches and wealth that the Torah says, which again, sometimes it's spiritual wealth, not necessarily physical wealth, although it also says physical wealth. And everything in this world has positive and negative. It could be used for holy things, it could be used for not such holy things, and just really keeping in mind that the Torah is something that adds so much significance, so much meaning, so much blessing to our life. And when we commit ourselves to being involved in Torah and learning Torah and adding in Torah and letting the Torah make us better people, that really achieves the purpose for Torah. I'm afraid we're running out of time, and we have a few more things, but I'd rather open the floor up for any questions or any clarifications needed, or any contributions. If anyone has any ideas they'd love to share or contribute or reflect back on what was heard here today. Anything? Hey, Fern, yes. There we go.
It's very male-oriented, the Pirkei Avot. So, it's kind of disturbing. I've studied this before. It's kind of disturbing when we first get into it, but then you realize that the Torah is a feminine word. So the overarching the overarching perpetrator, I can't think of it, provider is a feminine essence, which I think, I'm sure there's something in here about the qualities of that. There, certainly there is in many of the Tehillim, but the essence of kindness and loving your neighbor and all nurturing and how you treat your children, how you treat your parents, that's in there. So it almost seems to me like Torah is the essence, and the male counterpart has a lot of stuff to do, a lot of work to do.
I love that. Yes. So what's interesting is that Moshe Rabbeinu actually told the Torah to the women before he told it to the men. There's a commentary that says that the women were told the Torah before the men, because women were created more spiritually. Women are more spiritually inclined, and sometimes more value inclined. Sometimes, of course, everyone's different, but we are that. And what's interesting, I can't remember the source, but yes, it's true that the commandments are primarily on males. Males have more obligations. Learning Torah, in fact, is an obligation for males. Not women aren't obligated like men are obligated to learn Torah. And I heard this explanation, which I kind of liked, and I can't verify the source, but it said that men are commanded to do certain things, and to learn Torah and be more involved in the Torah, because a woman doesn't need to be commanded. A woman naturally senses truth. A woman naturally is more spiritual, is more value driven, and she will find it. She will be involved with it. Even if she's busy, raising a family, or she's busy with other things, she's going to start, she's going to be attracted to spirituality, to meaning, and she's going to impart that to her children naturally. Whereas a man, it may not come as naturally, and therefore he needs to be commanded, wait, this is what you got to do. You're not necessarily going to do it unless God instructs you. And it's interesting, they bring that similarity because it says you should respect your, it says you should respect your father, and you should, it says you should love your mother. Basically, when it talks about honoring your parents, it emphasizes that you need to respect your mother and you need to love your father. And nowadays, maybe it's a little different, but in the old, why does it say that? Because respecting your mom is harder, maybe, than loving her. It's easy to love your mother because of all the things sometimes it's easier to love your mother, and therefore you're commanded to respect her because that's necessary as well. Whereas when it comes to your father, especially fathers of old, they demanded a lot of respect. It's easy to respect them, but might be harder to love them. And so that's what the command is, to love them. So the Torah often, gives commandments because it knows us better than we know ourselves. And so to direct us on the good, just path, it often gives us commandments. So similarly, men are required to do a lot more because they're not as spiritually inclined as women are. So I love that idea. Again, I don't know the exact source, so I don't know if it's completely verified, but I like that. Thank you, Fern, for your contribution. And thank you, everybody, for joining and sharing and just being present. I hope you benefited, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.